What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This week we're back on Project Dimebag. Last episode you guys seen us fabricate our transmission tunnel. We popped off the cab to get all that tedious welding done. Well, this week we're gonna be turning our attention to the GSI chassis. We're gonna be getting our air lines, our fuel lines, and our brake lines mounted up. But first, let's take a step back to the past when the cab was on the chassis, and let's get that rear end set.
All right, so we got all of our components now here next to our rear of the frame. What we're gonna be doing is mocking up this rear housing so we could check out our wheel fitment. So what they do is they give you this cool bracket, and this bracket has multiple things integrated into it. Over here where my thumb is and below, these two holes are gonna be for our 4 link ends. This flat surface here with the hole in the bottom, boom, our airbag. And then on the rear is our Watts link. Will go right there. So this is kind of all in one bracket. So we got our rear completely mocked up. We got our Watts link hooked up with our hardware. We got our 4 links hooked up to the bracket. We have our airbag mount under here. And then finally, we don't have it because we're missing the right hardware for this, but eventually there's gonna be a longer bolt that comes out here with a stem, and this shock will compress and slip over and bolt to this bottom bracket. So this one bracket mounts the axle, the shock, airbag, and the Watts link to it. So it is a fancy multi-purpose bracket. Also here you can see I got my pinion finder, and whoop, it fell. There we go. Right now it's reading about 95, I would say. And they said we want it set at 3 to 4 degrees pinion angle. So I'm just gonna tilt it a hair in like this, and that will get our 3 to 4 degrees. So in order to set everything in place, we're gonna be welding these 2 points together and then running a nice bead around, and then everything will bolt onto the bracket. We're gonna be good to go back here. One other thing is the ride height. So we're actually tacking this in place at ride height. Ride height, it's usually roughly about half the shock travel. So I measured this to be 6.5, which means that 3.25 is halfway. Even though we don't have this hardware, I compressed this by hand and lined it up with this bolt and kept playing with it until the shock showing was 3.25 inches. So I set this here. This is about our ride height for our rear end.
Now that we have our rear end in, we're going to be shifting the truck around a little bit today. We're gonna turn it and we're gonna get our bed mocked up. That way we could get some measurements and dimensions over to Vossen so we could get our wheels working. Let's rock and roll. All right, so we got our bed mocked up, as you see, which is kind of boggling our mind. The frame is flat on the floor. The cab of the truck is flat to the floor. But then you look at the bed and it rakes up in the back. Now there's a couple things going on that are playing with our eyeballs, but if you look at the moldings, which is probably hard to see on camera, the moldings go down. You got about 12.5 inches between the bottom molding and the top molding on the front side of the bed. And on the back side, you got about 12. We went to the internet and looked at a couple other pictures of these trucks, and that seems to be normal. However, I did a measurement of the floor to the top of the bed here, and it was like 32, and then over here it was 34.5 or 34.75. So the bed seems to be raking up. If I lob these 2 mounting points off, that will drop this thing down. Ideally, we want the whole truck to sit flat when it's laid out. Because when you look at our level's pitching up, and then this one's actually pitching down, so it's not our floor. I'm gonna get out the old die grinder, cut these off. Now we got the bed sitting where we believe it should be. We got those mounting little braces lobbed off. So now it's sitting a lot more level. So now we're just trying to decide on the wheels. This is a tire for a 24-inch wheel. This is what, a 305 35 24. I mean, it's actually above the bedside. That's not really the goal here. If anything, I kind of would love to see it below this line. So I'm thinking we just roll with some 22s on this thing, man. I think 24s are cool, but I think it's a little overkill. We're gonna get back spacing and then we'll decide on the wheel size. But looking good, man. I could already see it coming together.
All right, now that we got our fuel tank in and our battery trays, I'm gonna start planning out our air system. We got our aluminum flow tank. They come with some brackets. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to use these. We also have our Airlift manifold.
Quick break from the work. This is future Andrew, and this is the future dime bag. And underneath the hood is our future 3-liter Whipple supercharger that you guys are gonna have to wait till the future episode to see it get installed. But
the good news is you don't have to wait to the future to pick yourself up some dime bag merch. Just hit the link in the description, head over to www.salvagesavage.com and get yourself some dime bag gear.
I made some custom brackets to mount our air tank. We've got it low profile, tucked down. We're gonna be making some bracketry to mount our solenoid and ECU right here on our tank. So I'm gonna get some stuff designed and cut out for that. And then also we're gonna start laying out our air compressors. We're trying to get everything laid out in a really nice symmetrical way because we are also gonna be making hand bent custom aluminum airlines for this chassis as well. Got this thing cut out. We'll go ahead and clean it up and get it ready to start bending. Got that bracket all finished up, got it bent, cut, clean, ready to go. And then I went ahead and mounted it on here, grabbed some hardware. We're trying to keep everything underneath the frame itself. So the frame will be the highest point inside of our bed. We're trying to retain as much space for usable bed space as possible. That's why all this stuff is tucked down real low in the back here. So with this one all set, done, just got to go ahead and get another side made up. All right, so we've got these brackets already made for our air compressors. Moving on to getting our manifold for all of our air lines mounted onto our tank. So I've got some standoff brackets I've already cut out here that are gonna sit like this, and then we're gonna make a bridge over the top of that to connect the two and mount the block right here. How that's gonna hold our air unit right somewhere around here. Once I get all this stuff metal finished and everything smoothed out, we'll go ahead and get it tacked up, and then we'll test fit it and then final weld it. I'm gonna have Mikey weld up the mount bracket for the Airlift management unit and still have the cab off of the chassis. We're gonna be working on getting our fuel system set. We've got a fuel tank, a fuel system provided to us by GSI. This tank is made specifically for this chassis, 19-gallon capacity, and it comes with this awesome hanger and the adapter plate you see here. We are putting two 340 per hour pumps in this thing. Everything that we're using is E85 compliant. Not 100% sure if we're gonna be running E85 at first, but if we want to, we can. And now we're gonna start getting all of our lines laid out. I'm gonna get my pump mounted, and then we'll continue on starting mounting our lines down the frame. So we've got our tank, we've got our Aeromotive fuel pumps, and to get all of that fuel out of the tank and up to the front where the engine is, we have a bunch of Vibrant performance fittings, hose ends, hose clamps, ORB fittings, as well as some Vibrant Performance hose. We opted for the blue tracer on this one, give it a little bit of flair. Also our Holley post pump filter. So we've got all the stuff that we need to make this happen. All right, pump's mounted in here. Now we can go ahead and start getting our hosing mounted. You can see I've got my fittings started here that we're going to begin with. Dash 8 outlets out of each of the pumps. One of the last things I'm going to have to do here is get our fuel pressure regulator mounted. I'm choosing to do so right here on the side of the frame rail. And we now have this really smoothed out firewall, custom bead roll work on it, and we want to show all that off in every little bit we can. We're going to have it nice and clean. So we're choosing to put our regulator down here, right here on the frame rail. So we've got a bunch done with our fuel system. Still need a couple fittings here to transition up and over the frame rail, which I'm waiting on, as well as an adapter fitting for our regulator. So I'm gonna move on to some more stuff that we have to get completed, which is brake plumbing. So I've got delivery of a bunch of stuff here, tube nuts, braided steel line, T-fittings, and all the associated stuff that we need to get the brake system going on this truck. So I'm gonna start laying that stuff out, get our tabs mounted for all of our bulkheads. You can see I've already cut a bunch of stuff out on our plasma table to have somewhere to mount all of our bulkheads to. I'm gonna get to work and start getting these lines plumbed. I've got my bulkheads laid out here, and all I have to do is make a hard line to join my two here to complete the rear axle section. I want to follow the radius here and just have it, you know, flow over the top of this. I went looking around in our metal bins and I found this guy. Big 4-inch piece of tube. Got it in the vise, and we'll go ahead and use that and just start bending this thing over the top of it. We'll get a mark to reference where this bend has to start and stop. Now with the rear axle section completed, we can start going up to this bulkhead that I have here on the frame, and then start running our long section that's going to go all the way to the front of the brake master cylinder. All right, continue on with plumbing the brake lines. I've already started my run back to the front to mate up to the master cylinder here in this area. I've already made a mark right here on the frame rail to give us indication of where our firewall is, to know where to stop our line and start heading back up so we can make a mating section there. Now we're going to start focusing on the front end of the truck, the front brake circuit.
Got our aluminum little bracket stand for our Airlift performance manifold, all welded up. Got the Airlift performance manifold bracket welded to our tank. So now we can start mocking up our airlines. Go ahead and get all these fittings put in and start kind of making a plan and laying out all of our 3/8 aluminum hard lines. All right, so what I need to do is figure out our angle from our manifold, where our outlets are, to the top of our C-notch or our frame. So I got a 4-foot level laid out here on the C-notch. Make sure it's level. Then we'll use our little angle finder doohickey. Set that there like that. Lock that in. And that's gonna be our first bend out of this manifold. And I'm gonna try to keep it as tight as possible just so we have nice clearance once we put our bed floor in. All right, we got the driver's side, rear, bag, 100% done. I know it looks simple, but believe it or not, it's not. Now that I got this one done, I'm gonna go ahead and mirror image my driver's side. So I just gotta do my 90 down here and cut it to length. All right, driver's side is on. It's tight here on our fitting. 90'd up, 90'd over. We got this bent down, then we got it bent to match our frame rail right here. What I'm gonna do is cut this section here. And this is where we're gonna put a bulkhead. We'll weld a little tab to our frame, which will hold our bulkhead and keep this line nice and tight and sturdy. Get our tabs welded on, and we'll be able to do the straight shot all the way down. So we got a nice swoop down here. Now we're riding on the top of our frame rail, so we're able to get some straps. Boom, boom, boom. Then I'm 90'd. And then we are hugging the side of our transmission tunnel going down. At this point, we're gonna come up. Then I'm gonna hug the top of the frame rail right here. All right, so our middle line here on the left side of the manifold is for our tank. So this is gonna be supplying the air to our manifold. So basically this line here would dive down. Then it's gonna come swooping across over here next to the bag onto the frame here, and then come back over this way, which I'm gonna need a dryer. So our dryer is just to make sure we're not putting a bunch of moisture into the manifold. So we'll come out of the tank here, turn a 90 to the frame rail into the dryer. All right, we got all of our bags fed by our 1/4-inch line. We got everything strapped down along our frame. Boom, boom. We got our bulkheads on. Everything's looking good. The only two last lines are our compressor feeds to our tank.
All right, so we're moving right along. One of the things that I want to do is get a mounting location for our remote coil bracket. So this little guy is meant to hold your ignition coils. This is an awesome little bracket. You can bolt it, I mean, anywhere you want, as long as you have ignition wires that are long enough to reach and an engine harness to get all the information back to your ECU. So with that being said, we are going to remote mount our coils. We like doing that to keep the valve covers nice and clean and keep all the electronics off of here. One, it keeps the ignition coils away from heat. And two, it aesthetically makes it look a lot better because now there's no obstruction. And we're probably going to do a really cool custom billet valve cover with some engraving on it. So we've done some consideration about where we're going to put it. We've thought about putting it down low on the cross member, but that was kind of weird. Then we thought about maybe bolting them onto the block. Didn't really like that. For half a second, somebody thought about putting them there, but it's way too close to all the heat from the exhaust system. So we finally thought of putting them located right down here. We're gonna have to watch out for our belt routing. I don't have my drive kit yet. It's coming with our supercharger, but I'm gonna try to get it mounted somewhere around here. Enough talking about it and showing you about it. We're gonna go ahead and get a little bracket made. I've already designed something in our CAD program. You can see here, I've already got it sent to our plasma. I just have to load up our material onto there. I'm gonna be using a 3/16 steel. It's gonna take one bend in it, and yeah, it should be real simple. So I'm gonna get this thing printed out and then we'll prep the metal, get it tacked onto the frame. All right, so I was mocking up all these coils onto here. We've got a nice set of MSD LS ignition coils. They're a factory style replacement, and this bracket looks like, I'm going to assume, is made for a factory coil, and the mounting boss for a factory coil is probably just slightly thinner here. So you can see that I've got all 3 and almost 4 coils on, but I've ran out of room between each of these spacers here to fit my last coil. So to keep the spacing even between each of them, I'm gonna have to cut all of them down. I'd rather keep them all even than have them, you know, different spacing apart from each other. So I'm gonna measure the distance that I'm short here and divide that by the 4, and then just take an equal amount off of each one of these spacers. All right, perfect fit. Everything looks all good. Now I'm gonna put this onto the chassis and then we'll tack this guy in. All right, so I've got the driver's side coil mount bracket all finalized on this side. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing for the other side. So with those coil mount brackets out of the way, we're going to continue moving on to getting some of the bracketry finalized on our GSI chassis. Next on the list is going to be electronics for our air management system and also electronics for our fuel pumps. So what we need is a trigger system for everything that's going on in the back. We have 2 in-tank fuel pumps as well as our 2 air pumps in the back. I'm going to mount 4 relays in the back to control the power delivery. What I'm gonna do is make just a small panel over here. Nothing too fancy, just somewhere for these things to live. Moving right along, we've almost finished doing all the wiring back here for our air management system. The last part that I got going on is a negative battery ground stud going right down here in the back of the frame. Instead of just grounding everything directly into the frame and just having holes and stuff bolted everywhere to the frame wherever there's an electronic that needs to be grounded, I'd rather just have one stud that's a common place, have one wire run from the batteries to here, and then we can go ahead and run all of our pumps, our Airlift management ECU, and our high pressure electronic fuel pumps to run to this same ground. All right, I'm all wrapped up with getting the air management stuff wired in. We're doing all this stuff now, not just to try to get ahead of the game, but really just to get the air system up so we can pressurize all of our lines to double check for any kind of leaks.
All right, as you see, our chassis is officially off the jack stands. It's rolling. It's a complete chassis at this point. We got all of our air lines, all our hard lines all put on. We love all of our brackets. Andrew got our coil relocation brackets mounted. He also got our brake lines, all the brackets put on. He got all the hard lines ran, soft lines ran to the calipers. He also ran our complete fuel system. Basically all the lines are ran from our Aeromotive pump. Looking real nice. We got all this Vibrant hose with the blue stripe. I think that looks sharp. Everything is real tidy, man. I'm happy with the way that came out. We got our Holley fuel filter and our Aeromotive regulator. Only thing left to do is feed our fuel rails on our Whipple supercharger, which is on its way. Romeo did a bunch of sanding to the chassis because we are leaving this thing raw dogged. We are gonna be putting a nice Poppy's gloss clear on it and possibly adding some flake into it, a little fairy dust. This one's that blue sapphire, hard to kind of see it. And then you got the silver bubble, the bubble tops. I kind of like that. So we got these samples. We're gonna go over it with the customer, see if he's down for fairy dust. So that's a wrap on the episode, man. Next episode, we're gonna be tearing down the chassis, getting all the parts ready for clear coat. We might be painting a couple things to be decided. We also got a ton of work to do to the cap. All that fabrication we did means it's gonna need some body work and some paint. So we still got a whole lot of work to do to get this thing ready for Dino's Get Down, November 11th. Andrew, let's see this thing bounce around a little, would you? There you go, boys and girls. Chassis, laying frame. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.